They told her not to look into his eyes, but when she did, everything changed. They dressed me in white as if innocence could be sewn on, as if stitches could turn a life into a gift. The seamstress's fingers were deft and cold. The veil smelled faintly of lavender and old smoke. Outside, the village breathed in the shallow way people do when they are hoping a thing will be over before it begins. I heard my name whispered the way you whisper a prayer and the way you whisper a warning. "Hold still," the seamstress murmured. "We mustn't snag. We mustn't, no," I said, though what I wanted was to rip the veil and let it tear like a storm. We mustn't snag. We mustn't spill. We mustn't think too loudly about the way I was being arranged, like a sacrifice on a plate. She fastened the last silver hook at my throat. "You are blessed, Elara." "Am I?" I didn't mean for it to sound like a knife. Her eyes flicked up to mine, then away. "Better you than—" She stopped herself and busied her hands with the satin belt. "I didn't ask who you was better than. Everyone, anyone, a faceless girl who was not them." I could feel my bitterness like grit in my mouth. This is what it is to be unwilling. To move because others push, to smile because others look, to walk because the ground beneath you is tilting that way and the torches are already lit. When they brought my father to see me, he swallowed hard and tried to shape his mouth around something noble. "You'll save us," he said, and wouldn't meet my eyes. I remembered being 8 and running barefoot on summer stones. I remembered the sound of his laugh when I'd brought him a lopsided plait of flowers. That laugh had become thin these last years. He hugged me with one arm, as if the other were keeping a ledger under his cloak. "Do you believe that?" I asked him. He looked at the window, where dusk had begun to blur the edges of the world, making the hilltops look like smudges of coal. "I believe in the moon's bargain." Then he kissed my hair and went away from the girl who had not been born to be an accounting entry. Priests waited by the gate with their lanterns. The blood moon was already lifting, fuller than full, a drop of crimson caught in a god's throat. Its light made the world look bruised. They placed the crimson veil over my white one, and all the colors bled into each other. Mercy into duty, hope into fear. As we walked, the villagers parted, and whispers made a soft hiss like snow sliding off a roof. Better her than me. "She looks calm. May the moon be satisfied." I wanted to shout that I was not calm nor satisfied, that my heart pounded and my palms were damp, and this entire ritual was the lazy cowardice of people who had decided long ago that if we appeased something we did not understand, we could keep our hands clean. The path to the old bridge was made of worn planks, the rope wrapped in frost. Below, the river looked like the back of a sleeping beast, black and slow. On the other side, the forest began. Tall firs needled the sky, and beyond them, somewhere within those ranks, the white keep rose where the moon's bride was delivered, and the oath was refreshed, and the kingdom was kept safe for another century. "Remember," one of the priests said, as he handed me to the guard. "Do not meet the king's eyes until he lifts the veil. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not beg." "I have no begging left," I said. "It is better that way." I stepped onto the bridge. The boards creaked. A knot in the wood looked like a closed eye. The guards kept pace a few steps behind me. The forest's breath met us, fur and ice and the faint iron scent of old things. Bitterness followed me like a second shadow. I talked to it inside my skull. "You can stay. You have earned your place. You will not make me small. If I must go where others send me, I will at least carry my anger like a banner." When the castle revealed itself, it happened all at once. The trees pulled back as if called to heal, and there it stood, high and pale, a cliff of stone and frost, windows like watchful wounds. The gate was iron filigree, twisted with shapes of moons and those who knelt beneath them. It opened with a sound I felt in my teeth. Inside, candles burned in niches. The air shimmered with the kind of cold that bites the soft insides of your nose. The corridor stretched and stretched, treads swallowing the sound of my slippers. At the end, a hall opened with ribs of carved stone arching into shadow. And there he was. He stood at the far side of the hall, in formal black cut like a confession. His hair was dark, his shoulders held a particular kind of tension I recognized from men in the fields who worked until their hands bled because there was no other way to keep hunger out. He was not crowned. He wore no sword. The guards melted away to the edges of the hall and then out, taking the priests with them. The doors hummed softly when they closed, as if they had finished a familiar sentence. I waited. The crimson veil pressed against my lips as I breathed. He came down the steps, slow, as though he were counting them and needed them to obey. When he reached me, he did not touch me first. He bowed his head, this man who was king because the moon said so, or because people said the moon said so, or both. May I? His voice was low, a scratch of flint rather than honey. The first thing I saw when he lifted the crimson was his eyes. Every warning to keep mine down spilled from my mind like water out of cupped hands. They were not the eyes of a monster. They were not cruel or cold. They looked tired in the way the sea looks tired when it hits the same cliff for 1,000 years and finds the cliff still standing. "Welcome, Elara," he said, and my name was not spoiled in his mouth. "Do you know me?" I asked quietly, "or only the role they have shoved me into?" "Tonight, I know you only as yourself. Tomorrow, the role will try to swallow us both." His mouth curved into something like a rueful smile. "I am Kale. A name is a small bridge." I stepped onto it. "Kale." He offered his arm. The bitterness in me stirred like a cat shifting position, suspicious, unwilling to be charmed. But his arm was steady and warm. He led me to a long table with a simple meal set. Bread dark as earth, soup steaming in a bowl carved from stone, slices of baked root that shone with glaze. No gold, no peacocks, no feasts. It looked like the kind of supper a man eats when he has learned that hunger is a god you appease daily. "If you cannot eat, we can wait," he said. "I can," I said, because the day had been a fast of fear and because even bitterness could not survive on air alone. I took a bite. The soup tasted of time and something sweet. "Did your cooks make this for every new—" I swallowed the word. "Bride." My throat felt too small. "Sometimes I made it," he said, almost as if he were ashamed of the admission. "They would not eat otherwise." "Because they were afraid you poisoned it?" "No," he said softly. "Because their hands shook and they needed someone to sit with them and hold the bowl." He looked away when he said it, and something in my chest moved. Bitterness adjusted again. It did not disappear. It would not. But I felt the first hairline crack. When I set the spoon down, he rose and offered me his hand. "Come," he said. "I will show you the place where we will speak the vow." "The vow that binds the kingdom?" He hesitated. "The vow that binds us." He led me up a staircase that spiraled like a shell. The walls had thin windows with thick frost around their edges. I could see the moon through them, following us with that too large eye. At the top, a door stood with a simple bar. Kale lifted it and pushed the door with his shoulder, and it opened onto a chamber that had no ceiling, only sky and moon and the breath of winter. In the center, a bowl of stone waited, already cradling a little fire that did not melt the frost. Around the edges of the chamber, thin metal chains lay draped like abandoned jewelry. When the wind shifted, some of the links chimed as if remembering a ceremony. "There are no priests," I said. "There are no priests here at all," Kale answered. "They are not welcome in this place. This is for us. The stories say—" "The stories are written by those who watch from the village green," he said, not unkindly. "They sing about sacrifice because they do not know what it is like to share a room with it." I stood a little straighter. He had said, share, not be. "What happens in this chamber?" I asked. "We speak the words, and the moon listens. It marks us. The keep holds the vow. By dawn, the land will have taken its next 100-year breath. He was quiet a moment. Elara, there is one thing I must say here, before the vow takes us where it will. I braced and nodded. You were not chosen because you were weak or because you were nothing to them. He searched my face. You were chosen because they were afraid, and fear looks for a body to wear that is not its own. I laughed once, a broken sound. And so they dress me in it. He did not flinch. If you must wear it, do not let them think it fits you. We let the wind speak while we listened. Far below, I could hear the river like a long throat clearing. The fire's tiny voices licked at the air. He stepped back and gestured to the stone bowl. When you are ready. Bitterness tugged at me then, sullen and stubborn. What about your father looking at the window instead of you? It hissed. What about the seamstress's careful lies? What about the priests telling you not to beg because they have grown addicted to the sound of your silence? I took a breath so deep it felt like I was drowning and then righting myself in the same moment. I will not pretend to be grateful, I said, looking at Kale. If I find love in this place, it will not be because anyone forced it into my hands. Good. He nodded once. Love does not answer to force. He cut his palm with a small, thin blade and let a drop fall into the fire. It flared the color of fall leaves. Then he held the blade out to me, hilt first. I watched my hand take it. I pressed it and felt the sting like a reprimand and then like a promise. A drop fell. The flame rose white. Kale took my cut hand between both of his. His hands were warm despite the cold. Repeat after me if you like, or say your own words. The moon hears truth and little else. He spoke first. I am Kale, son of the oath, keeper of the keep. I cannot offer you freedom from the vow, but I offer you whatever freedom lives within it, the freedom to speak, to be held, to be unafraid in my presence. If I must belong to a duty, let me also belong to you. My throat closed around the rush in it, and I hated that it was so easy to be moved by someone who had, by simply existing inside this machine, benefited from it. But when I lifted my eyes to his, he looked unarmored. Not a king invoking a law, a man asking a thing he was not sure he deserved to ask. I am Elara, I said, and my name sounded like a doorway opening. I do not forgive those who sent me. Not yet. I do not understand this curse or your part in it. Not yet. But if there is love in this place, it will be mine to give, and I will give it not to appease the moon, but because I choose you. I swallowed. If I ever do. A breath of something, not wind, moved over the chamber. The flames leaned toward us, listening. The chains at the edge made the sound of rain on a roof. Kale's eyes brightened with something that could have been pain or hope. The moon did not split. No thunder. Only a pressure, as if the air had thickened. I felt something touch my palm where the cut burned. When I looked, a thin line of light had gathered there and then sunk like water into the skin. A matching light vanished into Kale's. That is all? I asked, half of me disappointed there was no proof, the other half grateful. That is all, he said. It is enough. He led me to a small chamber that had once been luxurious before the curse had taught everyone to economize nothing more than warmth, a bed, a hearth with a small fire, a chair by a window. He did not close the door behind him when he left me to sleep. For a long time, I lay awake, listening to the castle settle, listening to my own heartbeat argue with my bitterness until both were too tired to keep speaking. In the days that followed, life in the keep arranged itself around two truths that could not be reconciled, but tried to be neighbors. I had been unwillingly given, and Kale did not behave like a man who delighted in what others set on his table. He rose early and helped stack wood. He spent hours in the library with ledgers spread like maps, his brow drawn into that same stubborn line. When I passed him in a corridor, he stepped aside as if making way for a carriage. When I spoke, He listened with the attention of a man who has learned there are very few words worth hearing and fewer worth believing. Sometimes we ate together. Sometimes I ate alone because the world was too loud and I did not want to be seen tenderly. I learned the keep's bones. The northwest tower creaked when the wind was wrong. The kitchens smelled most afternoons of onions and flour and a pinch of spice some cook had bartered for with stories and stubbornness. There was a chapel abandoned to dust. No priests, no God, just the strange quiet of a room that had once been asked to listen and did not like what it heard. In the courtyard, a linden tree leaned as if whispering to the stones. I also learned where the keep kept its ghosts, not ghosts of people. There were no faces in windows, no hands reaching from mirrors. These ghosts were made of habit and longing. A shelf of combs in a dressing room, a shawl folded too neatly on the end of a bed no one had slept in for years, a shoe under a chest. The lives of women who had been here before me had left behind these husks of their presence, as if the keep had not wanted to wash them away. I felt the bitterness press cold fingers over my mouth when I found them. "Why are these things still here?" I asked him once, holding the shawl like a strange animal. "Because when morning came," he said, "they were gone, their bodies, their voices, their warmth. The things were all that remained. We could not bring ourselves to burn them." I laid the shawl down. "Where did they go?" He looked past me to the window. "The vow takes what was promised." He sounded like a man repeating a fact he has learned to say without choking. "But not you. The vow does not require a king," he said, "only a keeper." "And a bride," I said. His jaw tightened. "Yes." We did not speak for a while after that. It is difficult to talk when there is a cliff opening under your feet and you are both staring into it. Yet tenderness found us in small ways. He set a coal pan by my chair on the coldest morning and pretended not to notice I noticed. When a thread on my sleeve caught in a nailhead, he took it between his fingers and freed it without breaking the thread or touching my skin anywhere else. When I had a bad night and woke with a sound in my throat I did not recognize, he came to my door and sat outside it until dawn without knocking. And when I opened the door, he simply said, "Good morning," as if he had been passing by and thought to say so. My bitterness began to change shape. From a blade to a shield. From something that cut anything near it to something I could kneel behind when I needed to breathe. Some days I still hated them. The villagers, the priests, the seamstress with her careful lies. Some days that hatred was a low hum. Some days it was a wave that hit and retreated, leaving foam and splinters. But when I looked at Cale, I saw a man who was both inside the machine and crushed by it. It is difficult to hate a person who kneels beside the same wheel and places shoulder to the same impossible turning. One evening, after a day of snow that fell in flakes big as moths, we found ourselves in the library together. The fire was small in the enormous grate. The shelves had a lean to them, as if even wood had come to understand the way this place pulled everything slightly toward the center. Cale stood by the window, a ledger in his hand. I traced the spine of a book without seeing it. "Will you tell me the truth?" I asked the glass. I saw him set the ledger down. "If I can." "Why do you stay?" He was quiet. "Because someone must keep the vow." "And it must be you?" "It has been me for as long as I can remember." "That is not an answer." I turned. "You could run, or refuse, or choose to break it." He laughed, but there was no mirth in it. "And then what? The storms that once drowned our fields will return. The plague that took my mother in a week will come back and take the rest. The mines that poison the river will poison it again. Do you think I have not tried to imagine a world where my leaving is a kindness? I have. Each time it ends in the same place. Children coughing and the old dying in summer. The moon's bargain is ugly and it should shame us, but it holds the world together. Shame you, I said. Us, he said, and the word landed, heavy and right. I crossed the room and took the ledger from the table and closed it. "Do you love this place?" I asked, and wished I had not called it place instead of people. "I love the sound the river makes when it is not boiling with sickness," he said. "I love the way the wheat bows when wind touches it. I love the linden in the courtyard and the way it blossoms like a quiet story. I love the children when they run. I love the way old men argue as if the world depends on their correct memory of some harvest long past. I love what I am charged to keep." He looked at me. "It is the only way to survive a duty like this, to find something inside it worth loving and hold on until your fingers bleed." I held his gaze. Then, because the moment hovered, I asked the other question, the one that rattled inside my chest at night. "Did you love any of them? The brides?" His breath left him like a door opening in a storm. He sat. "I learned not to try. Or rather, I tried and I learned. It is a particular cruelty to begin to love someone when you know that dawn is a knife." He raked a hand through his hair. "They were not all kind to me. They had every reason not to be. I do not keep a tally of their kindnesses or their stings. I remember their names. I remember that some of them liked honey in their tea and some could not bear the smell of thyme. I remember that one sang herself to sleep. And if," I swallowed, "if one began to love you?" He closed his eyes, opened them. "Then I would have been a man with something to lose who could not keep it." His mouth trembled once, then steadied. "I do not know if that is more cruel than the rest." The fire shifted. A book settled on a shelf. The moon, outside, worked its slow revolution. I crossed the room to the window and stood so close to him, our sleeves brushed. "What if we were cruel to the cruelty?" I said. He tilted his head. "What if we did love, knowing dawn is a knife?" I said, and heard my own voice and felt ridiculous and braver than I had ever been. For a heartbeat, he did not move. Then his mouth softened, and I saw how handsome he was when grief loosened its grip. "Then," he said, "we would be very brave." "Not brave," I said, "stubborn. I am tired of everyone calling resignation by the wrong name." He laughed, real this time, low and warm, and the sound snuck under my ribs. "Stubborn, then." We did not touch. We did not need to. The world had shifted in that small way that changes everything months later. The villagers did not trust peace. Their fear was a muscle they had overused. It wanted to be flexed. Rumors carried through the forest on the same paths our bread and letters did. They said this bride was too quiet. They said she called the king by his name. They said the king had not sent her veil back. They said things fear says when it begins to gnaw at itself. When the priests came with lanterns and sickles, they did it with ceremony. They asked to be admitted to the keep, to observe the vow's integrity. Cale met them on the steps, with his hands resting loosely at his sides. "This place is not yours," he said. "It never has been. The moon's house is the priest's to enter. The moon has no house," he said, "only a sky." They tried to push past. The guards, Cale had few, and none of them the glistening double-breasted kind. They were men with scarred knuckles and women with hair braided tight for work, stepped forward. "Let them in," I said quietly. Cale's eyes cut toward me. "Let them see what they always refuse to look at." We led them to the vow chamber. The priests sniffed as if the cold offended them personally. They pointed at the chains. "These should be struck. The oath must be visible." "It is visible," Cale said, and took my hand. The thin scar on our palms warmed. The priest's eyes narrowed as if we had spoken a blasphemy in a language they did not understand. "The bride must be tested," one of them said. "We must ensure she is suitable." "She is here," Cale said evenly. "That is the test and its answer." They drew nearer to me, their lamps yellow, their faces lined like tidy fields. "Do you understand your role?" one asked me, voice patient in the way of men who prefer obedience to truth. "Yes," I said, and the bitterness which had become my shield lifted its edge. "Do you understand yours?" "I am the moon's mouth." "Then you should know how to close it," I said. They stared, as if I had struck them with a word they had not thought a woman's tongue could shape. One of them recovered and smiled. "You have become proud in your tower." "I have become unwilling to pretend that your fear is sacred," I said. "I was taken from my home to satisfy your story. I will not ensure you a happy ending too." "Careful," he breathed. Kale stepped between us, not to hide me, but to draw a line that had needed drawing for years. "You will leave," he said, "and take your lamps with you. The keep will keep, the vow will hold. If the moon needs your help, it will say so." They left furious and noisy, tripping over their own robes. When their lamps had vanished into the trees, Kale turned to me with something fierce and tender and astonished in his eyes. "You did not need me to speak for you," he said. "I needed you to stand where I could see you," I said. "There is a difference." He reached up then and touched my cheek as carefully as a man touches the first plum of summer. "Elara," he said, and there was nothing else in the world in that moment but my name in his mouth. I leaned toward him. It was not dramatic. There were no trumpets. My bitterness gave an amiable grunt and rolled onto its other side. His lips were warm and tasted faintly of the tea he liked. When he made a small, surprised sound in his throat, I felt something inside my chest answer like a door being unbolted from the inside. We did not hurry. We kept our stubbornness like a lamp cupped between our hands. Nights we sat by the window and watched the moon do what it has always done: rise, set, rise. We talked of small things: the way a fox had outwitted the chickens last spring, the taste of the bread when it was made with rye versus wheat, the fact that the linden in the courtyard had once been planted by a woman who had smuggled the sapling under her cloak on a winter day because she believed the keep needed something that could bloom. Sometimes we did not talk at all. Sometimes he lay on his back on the floor with his hands under his head and told me the names of the stars he knew, and sometimes I lay beside him and pretended to believe him when he made one up because the real name had slipped his mind. When we touched, it was with the reverence of those who know the world can take from you at dawn what you found at midnight. He kissed my wrists as if they were a new road he intended to walk with care. I learned the places on his back where old work had left its aches and pressed my hands there until he shivered and the ache let go. We were not curing a curse with our bodies. We were teaching our bodies the truth we wanted the curse to learn. You cannot unmake what is chosen freely by those who love. We made a ceremony of vows that were not the moon's, not one night, not a single declaration. Many nights, many small declarations, placed like stones in a wall. I will not lie to you when I am afraid. I will let you see me when my mouth is full of hurt. I will not use my bitterness as a blade against you. I will stand beside you when the world points and says our names in a way that is not quite human. I will choose you when the choosing costs. When summer came, the linden bloomed. The courtyard smelled like honey had decided to become air. Kale and I sat on the low wall in the mornings and drank the tea he liked and let the petals fall into our cups. The keep felt less like a jaw and more like a body that could be warmed. The villagers' fear did not vanish. Fear does not like to die. One evening, a group came with ropes and axes, men I had grown up among, faces I had watched redden with laughter at weddings. They did not consider themselves cruel. They considered themselves practical. They had heard that the vow had been tampered with. They believed rumor more than they believed fields full of grain and children running without coughing. "Return the bride," one of them called into the courtyard, standing on the stones as if the keep were a market and he were bargaining for a wheel of cheese. Kale stood, his hand at my back. "No," he said. The man lifted his chin. "Then we will take her." There are moments when the world reveals what it thinks of you. Not with speeches, not with laws, but with the way hands reach. They came toward me with their ropes, not unkindly in their minds, I am sure. No, kindness would have been crueler. The guards stepped forward. Cale did not reach for a sword. He had no sword. He had something else. He had us. I stepped down from the wall. My heart beat calmly, as if it had been waiting for this. I looked at the men I had known since we could not see over fence rails. I thought of their children, of the seamstress's careful lies. I let my bitterness step beside me. We had a battle to fight, not with axes. "You will not touch me," I said, and it was not a plea. I came here unwilling, and in the keep I learned the difference between being given and being chosen. You gave me because you were afraid. I choose him because I am not. The men shifted. One laughed, short. "You have been enchanted by the king's—" "By his kindness?" I asked. "By his way of sitting outside a door at night because a woman inside it had remembered her village's cowardice and could not bear it? By the way he listens? I have been enchanted by the one thing we were told never to trust, a man's devotion." They did not know where to look. They had only the tools they had always used: insistence, the weight of custom, the comfort of blaming the sky. "You cannot refuse the moon," one said, but it sounded weak, like a song sung in the wrong key. "The moon does not ask you to carry ropes," I said. Cale stood a step behind me, not trying to hide me, his presence a warmth along my spine. "Go home," he said to them, and his voice had iron in it now, not the brittle kind that snaps, the forged kind that has been shaped in heat and knows its shape. "You have a harvest to bring in. You have children to read to and bread to bake and fields to weed. If the vow breaks, you will know. The river will tell you. The wind will tell you. You do not need to break a girl to check whether your God is awake." They wavered. Fear hates to be laughed at, and in that courtyard, with the linden dropping honey into the air, their fear began to feel a little foolish, even to itself. They left as people leave a party they had been sure would be better than it was. When the gate closed, my knees softened. Cale's hands were under my elbows before I could sway. "Stubborn," he said, proud and awed and a little afraid for me. "Stubborn," I agreed, and bit my lip to keep from crying until we were alone. That night we went to the vow chamber. The moon hung low and big, as if curious. We did not light the small fire. We did not need it. Our hands, laced, were warm enough. "Speak," Cale said, his mouth near my hair. "No," I said and smiled. "Listen." We listened to the wind be just wind. We listened to the chain links whisper against the stone without demanding blood to make them sing. We listened to the way two hearts sound when they have stopped trying to beat in separate houses. After a long time, I said, "I have an idea, and it is a foolish one. My favorite kind. What if the vow does not break with rage, but with devotion? What if everyone has been trying to cut a rope when it was a net meant to hold? Not to trap us, but to keep us from falling apart." He turned me in his arms and looked down into my face. And even with the moon making everything ridiculous, even with our breath marking itself in the cold, he found me as if he had been finding me for 100 years. "Then we must refuse to fall apart," he said. Dawn came as it always does, stubborn and inevitable. The sky paled. The stone grew less blue. The moon lowered, a tired coin. I held my breath. I expected the knife that had taken all the others. I expected the absence that had been the only miracle this keep ever performed in front of witnesses. The air pressed against my chest. My cut palm stung. The chain links made their rain-on-roof sound, and then there was a sensation, as if something had leaned in to listen, and hearing something it had not expected, leaned back again, puzzled. I did not vanish. I did not melt into words in a story someone else would tell and get wrong. I stood with Cale's hands on my waist, and the world remained, ordinary and enormous. We did not speak. We did not move. We did not dare to ask the next question. For how long? By noon, the linden had thrown its shade across the flagstones in the shape of a blessing. The cooks burned a loaf of bread and made another and laughed at themselves. In the afternoon, a boy who worked in the stables came to ask timidly if he might give the old mare an extra blanket because her joints were worse when the wind came off the river. The world did not know it had almost changed. Or perhaps it had, and decided to go on anyway, the way it does. Night returned with its old moon, less blood than pearl. Cale and I sat at the window with our tea and our stubbornness. "If it asks again," he said, meaning the vow, meaning the dawn, meaning the thing we had not named for fear it would turn its head and look directly at us. "We will give it the same answer." "We will," I said. It did ask again, in small ways. On a morning when I woke with terror knotted under my ribs like a hard little beast and told myself I did not deserve this life because I had not chosen it cleanly. On a day when a letter came from my father that said nothing and took 5 pages to say it, filled with weather and crop yields and my cousin's wedding and my mother's wrists. On an evening when there was a storm and the river was not as tame as we liked and the guards looked toward the sky as if it might be forming an old word. Each time, we answered with the only thing we had learned how to make in that keep that did not sour. We chose each other, not dramatically, not with fireworks, with bowls of stew eaten side by side, with hands held over the railing while the rain made the stones smell like summer. With quarrels that ended not because one of us won, but because neither of us wanted to win against the other. With the slow, patient, infuriating work of being 2 people who had decided to be one story. When the year turned and the moon returned to its old fullness, the priests stayed in their houses. The villagers lit their lamps and did not come. Someone sang, and the note rose and thinned and disappeared into the night. Cale and I went to the chamber where once the chain had made itself a choir. We stood under the open sky and let the cold kiss our cheeks. We did not cut our hands this time. We had nothing to prove. "I used to think I was the keeper of the vow," Cale said, looking up. "It turns out I was only the keeper of its house. You have been keeping the thing itself." "No," I said, and reached up to touch his mouth with my fingers. "We have." The moon looked down, and if it could look anything at all, it looked satisfied. Not because it had stolen another bride, not because it had been fed a fear it demanded and received. Because devotion, stubborn and unguided, had turned out to be more powerful than the stories about it. We returned to the room that had once been mine and had become ours. Cale poured tea. The steam rose and left little wet circles on the window. He put one hand on the back of my chair as if to anchor himself to the sight of me. The linden's branches moved in the wind like a hand learning to speak. "You were given to me," he said softly, as if admitting a sin. "I was," I said, and took his hand. "But I stayed because I love you." He bowed his head. The world outside the window stayed itself, a river being a river, a sky being a sky, a village inventing new rumors because the old ones had failed them. The keep, which had always been a jaw, felt like it was learning to be a mouth that could form new words. Against everyone who had made me a sacrifice, against everything that had once demanded our lives like a tax, against the moon and the priests and the old fear that moves into people's houses and puts its feet up and asks what's for supper. Against all of it, we stood, 2 stubborn fools with a kettle and a window, and a vow we had rewritten by the slow, radical act of choosing. Love had not burned the world down. It had made a place to live in it. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.